appreciate that, and appreciate all of you. Sometimes it's not the guys who make the initial decision because they know they couldn't make that initial decision unless it was the right thing to do, and it's the people who then stand behind. And I remember when kind of the trouble reached a tipping point when Datha Greitman showed up in our living room that Sunday after I was asked to leave because of differences over the new creation. That tremendously bolstered my faith. I knew, that God had put us in a situation, and that kind of goes back not only to our lesson, because Paul is being called to task for going into the synagogues and then accused of misusing the temple. Now, within congregations, there are often truth seekers. I met a great family at Montana Family Camp. Joe and Cinda and Elizabeth, who had moved to the Billings area from Georgia. And they had been attending a Bible church until something at the Bible church blew up. And there was a big split. And so, through contacts, they kind of got hooked up with the church there in Billings. I know Luke and Kevin and those guys are working with them. And I mean, this was a great family. I mean, they were just so open and so willing to learn, and I think within a lot of gatherings, a lot of congregations, there are people who just simply don't know any better. And that's who we're looking for. That's who Paul was looking for in the synagogues. See? He was using the established educational system of the Jews, the congregation, not in a church sense, but the school, see, the religious school, to find the church, to find truth seekers within, those congregations. Well, we all know religiously minded people, see? And so we have to kind of be aware of their situations, to keep kind of turning the deck over so that, the church can be established. And it's Vera, our mission of the month, food for families. That's kind of turning over, people. Vera, who was here, the red-haired Belarusian lady who was the head of the Red Cross for the Dzerzhinsk area, she knows families who are in need. So we met her, and we're in this little store, and she starts pointing at stuff. So she said, I have two families. I'll take a couple bags of groceries, too. Said, okay. And she said, I've had contact, initial contact with these families, but both of these families, this is my second visit. So I want to take them some food. I know they're in need of food. So she got food. And here, you know, we kind of walked in this real little store that I thought, man, it's like a carryout. You know, these prices are going to be terrible. So she orders these two packages, rice and staples and stuff. And so I get up to the counter and I'm going to pay for the stuff. Of course, I haven't been aware of anything that's been going on except, you know, the 2 bags are there. And so we get 2 bags of staples for 2 families, and it ends up being $30 total, $15 a family. I mean, you know, I'll pay a $15 cover charge to get in the door to talk to people, you know? So we take them to food. And one fellow, he broke his neck when he was 32 years old. He's 38 now. His mom and dad had been taking care of him in one room that was his bedroom, their bedroom, and living room, and a TV in the room, and a bathroom. And he's in the bed, can't get up. Hasn't been up in 6 years. She asked him if he had a wheelchair. He said no. He said, but they have to go down and borrow a wheelchair. But he said, it's not worth it because it takes half a day to go get the wheelchair, get transportation arranged, get the wheelchair borrowed, bring it back, and he can only sit in it for 10 minutes because it hurts too bad. So it's not worth going outside. Mama had died shortly after the first of the year, so Dad was taking care of him. Dad looked to be maybe in his 70s. I thought, what would my attitude be if I'd bedridden for 6 years? This guy's attitude was kind of, you know, what are you doing here now? And why are you in my home? I understood that. So she asked him what he needed, you know, and he kind of indicated he didn't need anything and was kind of private and kind of acted like we were invading his space. And I get that. But finally, you know, she said, look, you know, what can we help with? He said, well, I brought this up to a lot of people. He said, I've talked to the hospital. Nobody's done anything. I really don't. I mean, he didn't say it, but he really didn't expect us to do anything either. He said, I've lost a lot of weight in the last 6 years laying in this bed. He said, what I need is a smaller bedpan. Now, I'll leave it to your imagination what too big of a bedpan would do to a person's dignity every time they had to go to the bathroom. Can you imagine if somebody asked you what they could do to improve your quality of life? When we left, I asked Vera, I said, can you get, yeah, she said, I said, you get a bedpan. Dad taking care of him, not the cleanest place in the world. I don't know. I don't even know if I'll see Dad or the son. But you know what? Vera knows. Dima, the driver, knows. He knows now that somebody cared and intervened. Second stop. Stopped for the groceries. Took them in. Girl sitting on the floor. She looks like she's about 14 years old. I thought she was just sitting on the floor. But We pulled up to the place, a dilapidated wheelchair and a bicycle laying kind of tangled up together outside. And the door was one of these wooden doors that shut, but it was swung open, and there was curtains hung in the doorway. So curtains were kind of blowing out. But when you looked at the door, it was a wooden door, and about that much of the bottom of it was broke off. So you shut the door, you got that much of a gap between the door and the bottom, where I don't know how it was busted. So you pull in, and neighbors are kind of standing out in the yard, and they kind of give us the eye, you know. Vera said, this girl that we're going to go see said her brother is a drunk, and her mother just got out of prison, and she pretty much fares for herself. But she seems like a really, really good girl. And so we go in and we take the food in, and Mama comes out, and Mama's trying to monopolize the conversation. And Tanya, the girl sitting on the floor, kind of shoos her mother away. And so Vera wanted to know if Tanya had gotten her documentation, because in order for the Red Cross to buy food, to help, to provide any assistance at all, Tanya needs to prove that she is really a person. So she needs her birth certificate or some sort of documentation that proves that she exists. And she told Vera, no, I've looked all over. Well, not that much place to look, but I've looked all over and I can't find it. But somebody told me if I called that I could get a copy, and about that time she swings herself up on the couch from the floor, and I realize that her legs don't work. Well, then it comes out that she was born with cerebral palsy. She's 21 years old, living there with a drunken brother who is a functional drunk. He's employed most of the time. And a mom who just got out of prison. So Mom's and there's curtains on every doorway. And Mom, you can kind of see her feet underneath the curtain. Mom's standing there at the doorway. She's trying to listen to what's going on, you know. So Vera says to Tanya, she says, you want to go outside and talk? Tanya says, yeah. And here's the doorway, out this way. And Tanya's sitting here on the couch, and I'm first in line to the door. So I start to the door. Tanya swings herself down somehow, and I can't even describe how she kind of propels herself through the house, through the hallway towards the door. And it's obvious that if I don't move, she's going to run me over. And I don't know whether to get out of her way. I feel like I should help somehow. She's down here on the floor, scooting along. And so, I finally kind of get myself out of the way and get out the door, and I'm thinking I ought to help her down on this broken piece of concrete. And before I can do anything, she has swung herself down on the concrete and up in the wheelchair. And she's smiling all the time. I mean, she's just happy. So she gets outside and said, Tanya, we got a van here. You want to go anywhere? She looks confused for a minute. She says, I can go anywhere in this yard I want. She goes, I didn't even go up to the paved road. This guy told me that her world, why would she need to go anyplace else? Everything she needs, everything she's ever known. So I went goof around a little bit and have her take some pictures of wearing my hat. She just smiles. She's upbeat all the time. Vera says, what keeps you going? What keeps you so happy? Tanya says, God. I don't know what this girl knows about God. No idea. I'm telling you, in that circumstance, if she can point to God, what circumstance do I have to start feeling sorry for myself? There ain't one. So I want to do something, you know? I want to help this girl. But give her money. She doesn't have any needs as far as she's concerned. This is her life. And yet, I know in the back of my head that this girl is 21 years old. If her brother is a drunk and her mom's been in prison, she's in danger. The neighbors, we find out later, the neighbors thought we were a party van because drunks had just left the house. You give her money, she doesn't have any need for it. And if mom or the brother found out that she had it, they'd take it away from her. Well, she seemed pretty feisty. But in the course of the conversation, it came out that there was no running water in their apartment. She said there's water in all the rest of the apartments, but we had a leak in our pipes, and it was cheaper to just saw the pipes off because the pipes were rusty. And so we just carry water. I'm thinking, how's this girl go to the bathroom? You know, it gets cold there. And so I got this image of her making her way, you know, bouncing out onto that little piece of concrete and it being icy and bouncing her way to the outhouse. Adam and I went back that night to the flat. Both of us. And we got to do something. I don't know what to do, you know. I don't know how to help. It's just one of those things you can't get out of your head, you know. So Adam that night said, look, I don't know what it's going to take. But here's $100 towards it. Let's see if we can't get that water turned back on. You tell Steve you've got some seed money here to. It's a good idea. So right now we're in the process of finding out what the bill will be, what the estimate will be from the plumbers to get water into Tanya's apartment. But there are people living in these circumstances that sometimes really are beyond their control. Now there is willful ignorance. Just like sometimes people place themselves in circumstances where, you know, that was, you know, they're going to reap what they sow. But in these two instances, say, this is potential church people. Say, this is potential living stones that can be affected. And so there are potential living stones in congregations who just simply don't know anybody, and they need to have their interest piqued. Paul had been piquing some interest. Now, he got jammed up, okay, with Felix, the centurions. And so in chapter 24, he's going to be accused of sedition. That is to not only, say, the government and the religious body, see, they bring the high priest down and a lawyer, and they call him an orator, see, somebody to do their talking. In other words, a mouthpiece. See? And so they bring these accusations against Paul in front of Felix, who is the civil authority. So they have accused Paul in verse 5 of being a plague, a creator of dissension among the Jews, a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. He tried to profane the temple. Oh, he wanted to be judged by our law, so here we are. So we're here before you to have you examine him, that you can ascertain whether these things are true or not. The governor nods to Paul, says, look, you can present a defense. See? So Paul says, I'm gonna defend myself in verse 10. See? Because, it was just 12 days ago, I went up to Jerusalem to worship. See, he went up to the temple. And I wasn't in the temple disputing with anybody. I wasn't inciting the crowd. I wasn't even inciting the crowd in the synagogue or in the city. They can't prove the things that they now accuse me of. But I'll tell you this, verse 14. According to the way which they call a sect, so I worship the God of my fathers, believing all things which are written in the law and in the prophets. I have hope in God, which they themselves also accept, and that there will be a resurrection from the dead, both of the just and the unjust. So, verse 19, they ought to have been here before you to object if they had anything against me, see? Or else let those who are here themselves say if they found any wrongdoing in me while I stood in the council. Nevertheless, it's for this one statement, which I cried out standing among them, concerning the resurrection from the dead, I'm being judged by you this day, because the Pharisees believed in a resurrection from the dead. The Sadducees did not. Okay? So you're pretty much gonna not find too many takers in the congregation of the Sadducees. So you don't fish where there's no fish. But he sees that there is a combination of Sadducees and Pharisees on the council, so he's willing to use that, see, to get them to use their differences, to get them to take a look at, you see, what he's been doing. Well, what he does is make contact in the synagogue. And then we see him not only teaching in the synagogue, but spending time in the city teaching from house to house. So, we have opportunity, say, to sort through people. The most important thing that you have is your contacts. Now, you're going to have different places, depending on where you're at in life, your interests, to meet different people. But guerrilla warfare is the most effective warfare known to man. That 9/11, say, has created so much turmoil is because they're not in uniforms, you see, like the Revolutionary War. I mean, the British, dressed up in red coats, and they were pretty easily identifiable. But the revolutionaries, you see, shot with squirrel guns from behind trees. And so you couldn't identify them. Well, see, Paul's point is, see, that's just like the church today. See, we can go into these situations not as, you see, okay, we're gonna have a big stadium revival in Minsk. But 2 or 3 people, 4 or 5 people, 5 or 6 people going under the radar. Things that, I mean, really, the most hardened atheist wouldn't want Tanya not to have water. Wouldn't want this fellow not to have a bedpan. You can't stop a resurrected army. Verse 22, and Felix heard these things. Now, he kind of knew about. He adjourned the proceedings. He said, let me think about this. In the meantime, he's thinking about it, and he calls the centurion to keep Paul and let him have liberty. Let his friends come and see him, visit him. Continuing the guerrilla warfare. Now, Drusilla, Felix's wife, she's Jewish. She's got some background. Background's important. She knows some cultural stuff just because she's Jewish. Now, as she listens, as he listens, verse 25, reasoning about righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come, Felix is paying attention. See, here's what's going to happen. It's going to happen at some point with every contact that we make. Because everybody is either looking for a way in or looking for a way out. But it seems from every indication that Joe and Cinda, Elizabeth are looking for a way in. I don't know that. It sure seemed like every indication looking for a way in. Well, you can't always tell that, see? But Felix says, you know what? I know I'm going to have to change something here. I think I've heard enough. Go away for now. I have a more convenient time, I will call you. I don't know if they ever had a more convenient time. But you don't have to wait. Somebody tells you, I'll call you a more convenient time for them to call. No means no right now. Don't lose that number. Meanwhile, verse 25, he also hoped that money will be given to him by Paul. So kind of grease the skids here, and so get a little bit of a kickback, a little bit of a bribe here. Maybe I could release him. And so maybe if some of his friends have kind of got the idea here that it's not theology that's going to grease the skids. It's it's cold hard cash. That I'll keep calling him back in. For about 2 years. Think the message Paul had ever changed? You think Paul said, no, all this guy wants is a bribe. I'm not wasting my time. No. Yeah, I mean, really, Felix is holding all the cards, but I got to believe Paul's willing to tell him. Tell him. He asks the question, tell him the answer. 2 years go by. Verse 27, Festus succeeds Felix, and Felix couldn't squeeze any money out of Paul. Thought, well, I'll just it's the Jews that are having problems with this guy, and you never know when you might need some political favors in the bank. So, as a favor to the Jews, he left Paul bound. Politics often play a large part in congregations. Well, I don't mean Democrat, Republican. I mean where the real power is. In what family the power is invested. And just whose side are you going to line up on? Because, you could be a contender, You keep minding your P's and Q's, you might get to preach at the National Prayer Clinic or some of your contemporaries, already start preaching at Hillsborough Family Camp. You're probably the next one in line here, There's probably some things, Probably some things down the line for you. You just play ball. We're all going to have to decide. See, we're going to play ball. We're going to stand for the truth. And sometimes it's tempting to play ball. But the truth of the matter is, we will do nothing more important this week than to search for living stones. And sometimes we find them in places that just haven't been looked at before. So we go and we look. One more story. Steve's going to Kosovo with the wheelchairs in about 2 weeks. And when this all started, there was a fellow named Avni who was, I believe he was interpreting for Handicost, or maybe even working for Handicost. But I'm not sure on the details how Steve met him. But Avni was taken captive by the Serbs. He was Albanian. He was taken captive by the Serbs, and they had all these pictures of people who were missing, and still have pictures, 20 years now, because they were buried in mass graves. And so he showed us his picture was on this missing thing. He was one of the lucky ones. He was in a prison camp that the Serbians had put him in a prison camp, and after the war, they released him. He had lost almost 100 pounds in the prison camp. When he showed up at his mother's door, she didn't know who he was. They didn't know who this guy was that wandered up into the yard. Avni is a political science professor at the University of Kosovo in Pristina, in the capital city. The most prestigious university in Kosovo. He knows all about political science. He is a joy to talk. He speaks fluent English. So Steve and I, every afternoon, would call Avni, and he would come down and have dinner with us. And we would talk about God. We would talk about Western civilization versus the Muslim, because they're cultural Muslims. But his big line was that the only thing good that comes out of the East is the sun comes up every morning. He tells those Muslim students that, look, Western civilization is the way to go. You dress Western, and they do, and all of their society, you wouldn't know that you were in a Muslim society, except there's a very definite lack of sausage. They don't eat pork. You don't drink alcohol. Every day, Avni would come down, and he is just a joy to talk to. So I told Steve this weekend, I said, do you have Avni's email address? And he said, I think I do somewhere. He said, I'm going to get a hold of him and tell him we're coming. And he said, when you go in November, I'd like for you to go through Kosovo, make sure that this wheelchair project, make sure that people that got assigned wheelchairs, interview them, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, get Avni's email, because I want to meet up with that guy again. Okay. Yesterday, I get a call, Steve Doty, on the way home. That was yesterday. She says, Mike, you're never going to believe this. He said, you know where Avni is? I said, no. He said, he's in Ada, Ohio. He has a scholarship at Northern Ohio University and will be there until June of 2017. He said, I'm on my way to Ada right now. He said, and I've got a call in to Jeremy Wilson. I think we can bring this guy in. You know, I got to thinking, of all the people in the world, of all the universities in the United States, Avni gets a scholarship to attend, teach, do whatever at Ohio Northern University. When God said, I'll be with you always, I think we can count on him orchestrating some circumstances where we're going to run across some truth seekers. We just got to keep our eyes open and not grow weary. And just like Paul, use the system when it's to our advantage and to go into all the world. Each one of us are going to encounter circumstances this week. There are no coincidences. Just keep that in mind. Don't pray for open doors and then walk past them. Ask, seek, knock. Stand up and pray. Lord God in heaven,